All right, welcome back, everybody. Athlete Builder back in the house with my teammate Lucas Lorian. I'm Jim Beebe. I'm in the library. Today, we are lucky and fortunate to have Samantha Main from Parkview up north in Fort Wayne area. A little bit about Parkview. It's a health center, hospital, resources for everything medical. In addition, they have sports performance, sports medicine, sports nutrition. That's where Sammy and Lucas come in. Lucas actually works for Parkview, but he's a strength and conditioning coach at Northside High School in Fort Wayne. Sammy is a dietitian, and she works with athletes of all ages, but predominantly high school and college athletes. Parkview itself has at least 3,000 kids underneath them that they're working with at any one time, trying to get them better physically for sports. Sammy herself manages upwards 250 to 300, around 275. At any one point in time, she works with individuals and teams. Whole background in nutrition, BS, master's also. Grew up wanting to be a chef, ended up not quite making that route. The next best thing, working with athletes and their food. And we're lucky to have her on today. She spent her first tour of duty at Parkview was 5 years. Now she's on her second tour of duty of 5 years, or over 17 years in the field of helping people with what do you eat, when do you eat, how do you eat, how much to eat, what to drink to optimize performance. So welcome to the show today, Sammy. Glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Just starting right off, you kind of just laid it all out there that I wanted to be a chef growing up, but didn't have the resources, and you went with the next best thing. So how did you decide to go into the nutrition route, the dietitian route for, as a career?
Yeah. So, high school athlete, kind of had a little bit of disordered eating issues, and that kind of precluded me to really enjoying food in general, just being obsessed with it. So really wanted to be a chef, and my mom kind of was like, "You're not leaving the state." Well, there's not really anywhere great in the state to go to school to be a chef. Like, I want to go top level. So kind of decided that nutrition was going to be the next best thing. Wanted to help other people not suffer and struggle with what I did. Thought I wanted to work clinical. Turns out didn't really love that. So sports was really where I landed and absolutely loved.
What was the process? You said you had some challenges with eating. Did you fix that first and then go on to learn about nutrition and be a dietitian? Or was it, I'm learning about how nutrition works in college, and I'm going to use that knowledge and kind of fix myself internally?
Yeah, I don't know that we ever really fix those issues. They kind of
Right?
hang around with you and rear their head at the worst times.
Sure.
Still find it happens a lot. I mean, I compete in bodybuilding, so when I'm competing and we're prepping, sometimes a little bit of that kind of pops up again. But realized I couldn't keep going the way I was going and needed to kind of change some things. Got into college, environment started to change, stress levels started ramping up, so eating kind of altered there. Just the fact that I was in classes around other people who were taking care of their nutrition, doing a better job of feeding themselves than I was, kind of led me to do the same. So I'd say more so waited till college and kind of realized couldn't keep reacting the way I was and had to find a different way.
What's challenging is that there's still plenty of things unknown about food and how we handle it. There's also there's what the book says you need this many grams of fat, carbs, and protein. But then there's how you yourself absorb it and utilize it. And
Yeah.
then that's a moving target too as your body changes, as you age, and as your activity level changes. So it's constantly a moving target. And if you're anyone that's kind of obsessive, or you want to get really granular and you realize, well, shoot, man, I'm trying to be granular and it's just not quite working, because it's this kind of vicious little game that we have to play, and there's no exact answer all the time.
No, there really isn't. We're starting to move more towards genetics. Nutrigenomics is becoming a much bigger category than it ever was. We still haven't figured out a lot about genes. The problem with nutrition is, you're right, it's multifaceted. Not only is it multifaceted in our environment, our individual bodies, but how the genes react with our DNA and how they trigger certain things and help to turn on and off certain genes isn't something we know a lot about. And we don't know how that reacts in each individual person. So it's going to be a while before we can use that to really determine your individual diet, but we're really excited about it. It's something I can't wait to be able to do with my athletes. The day that we can sit down and say, I've got your DNA sheet. I know what it looks like. So here's how we eat for you specifically. Will be an awesome day, but we're not there yet. So we're moving in that direction. So hopefully it'll be easier. But you're right. If you're someone who's very type A, very numbers driven, it's really easy to get super anal about that. And in a real world, it's perfect. It's hard to be that perfect to really hit those numbers exact.
I find that's a huge challenge for any kind of athlete or business, in that people want more and more certainty before they take a step forward or implement a plan. And my approach oftentimes was that way because I'm a bit, OCD on those things. And what I've come to learn and realize is I'd rather make a decent step in the right direction. Maybe
Right?
I'm heading north, and I should be heading north by northeast, but at least I'm heading north. As long as I can get some quick feedback
Yeah.
on how I'm progressing as an athlete, then I'm able to adjust and adapt sooner versus the person that says, well, I got to have this first right and this right before I know this before I can make a step. And it's like, well, shit, man, by the time you know all that shit, you already wasted 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years.
Yeah, we're never getting there if we do that. Like,
Right.
2 steps forward and 1 step back, and we're just going to barely progress. Like, I agree. I think more athletes need to be little steps, but it's a great way to build a rapport with them. I mean, when you can change something small, because we don't like to change massive things in our food. We're very close to the vest with food. It's something that's tight for us, but if I can change one little thing in an athlete and then they see that progression, like you said, in their weights are going up, they're feeling stronger, they're recovering better, they're playing faster. If we can see one little improvement, the chances of them being willing to continue to stair step that are much, much higher.
You're absolutely right. Lucas and I spent a bunch of time on episode 8 with analyzing atomic habits. And if you like what James Clear puts out there, he talks about small things at a time. And the 4th requirement is that it be satisfying. So when you see that feedback where, hey, this is kind of working a little bit, that's
Right.
the satisfying piece. So you keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Right. So if you get that little bit, that's that drug that keeps you moving because say, hey, I'm improving just a little bit. And that's really what people want, is a little bit of improvement. And that compound interest effect. Every coach we bring on here, all the athletes are like, hey, just looking for small gains over and over and over again.
Yep.
And that's really the big secret. The big secret is that there's no real secrets. It's
Exactly.
hard work and consistency. Isn't that a tough sell though? Like, I got 6 kids and you're dealing with kids. I have coach kids, it's a bit tough sell, dealing with nutrition with them, isn't it?
It's an easier sell than clinical was.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
I mean, at least I'm working with athletes who want to make a change. They want to see improvement. And when they realize that nutrition can be one of those facets that can push those levers for them, it's a much easier sell than someone who, we're going to have to overhaul your whole diet. We're going to have to do it because this condition is going to put you at risk for death or worse. And they just don't want to hear it. There's so many other things going wrong in their life at that point in time that having to change something that they've done their entire life a certain way is just not going to happen. Whereas athletes, especially if we can catch them in the age group I work with, it's easier to change their habits.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to get ready to learn to cook on their own. So anything they can learn is great. They absorb it like a sponge. But it can be a bit of a tough sell if they're a little older and they've always done it this way. And I've tried everything and I want to lose weight. But, what you're telling me isn't going to work because I've tried everything. Well, have you really though? So, again, just begging and pleading for that one little step. And if you can get that one little step and see that result, then you've got your foot in the door.
It's funny the timing because we're talking about nutrition. I'm in this coffee shop last week, so I'm taking this test for this CrossFit event that we had. I passed this judges course. So I went someplace where no one knew me. And even though there's people around me, no one knows, so I can simply just work. These 2 older guys like my age, like I'm almost 50, these guys are probably around that age, and they're sitting there talking, their friends catching up, they haven't seen each other for a while, and I can overhear them a little bit, and they're talking about nutrition and food, and I'm like, oh, Jim, just don't say anything, just shut up, just let them go. Just let him go. And the one guy was talking about how he likes things quick and on the go. So at lunchtime, he always stops at a gas station and get a couple slices of pizza because it's quick. Right. Yeah, I understand it's got to be easy and fast, to make things happen. But his buddy corrected him and said, hey, you're going to need to do some prep work. You got to do something. The guy said, well, I'm not a person that likes to prep. And went back and forth. And finally, the pizza guy says, okay, you know what? I can go to Costco. I know they have those big boxes of Pop-Tarts, and those are pretty healthy. I'll get a box of those, and that could be my breakfast. So I'm starting off my day in the right foot. And I heard that piece, and I was like, all right, I decided. I'm definitely not saying anything.
I can't do anything here.
I'm not going to be able to dig these guys out of that hole that Pop-Tarts are not healthy options or an ideal healthy option for breakfast. So you're right. Getting kids when they're younger is going to be critical because you don't have that friction and that resistance buildup. So that's huge. Yeah. I did have a question about the undergrad and the master's work.
Yeah.
My wife's oldest daughter was at IU, and she started off in nutrition and wanted to be, dietitian, things like that. And she had grown up, in our gym, done CrossFit, and mostly did powerlifting in college, made the collegiate nationals, etc. And she knows, to build mass, it takes some protein and some work, right? Mm-hmm. And the professor stood up there on first dietitian class, nutrition class, said, you really don't need a lot of protein to build muscle, and you definitely don't need animal protein. So anyone that's getting in more than 50, 60, 70 grams of protein a day, that's really all you're going to need. That definitely doesn't need to be animal protein. So now I'm looking for Sammy's response.
Oh, I mean, when I was in college, we kind of got the same thing, 0.8 grams per pound of body weight is ideal. I don't think we knew as much about athletes then. And really, mainstream nutrition education is not based on the athlete. It's based on the majority of the population you're going to be dealing with. Individuals who need to lose weight, individuals who are just everyday sedentary humans. We know a lot of different things about that now, and I really hate to hear those kind of things. Like, no, it doesn't need to be animal protein, but can it be? Why not? And most people honestly can't get the amount they need as an athlete through plant sources unless they're really being careful about it. Most of our athletes who, I want to be a vegetarian, or I saw this documentary about vegetarians and athletes, and it's great. Okay, so let's go back and look at, were any of those athletes interviewed for that documentary? How hard do they work? Do they have a chef that cooks for them? Because you probably don't. So are you going to be able to source enough plant sources? It just kills me to hear people spread things like that and to honestly kind of stick their noses where it doesn't belong. If you're not an educator of athletes, do you know what's best for an athlete? If you're not working with that athlete's nutrition and you're not a nutritionist or a dietitian, do you really know what their goal is, what they should be eating? Probably not. Kind of how I feel about fitfluencers too. Like, stay in your lane. This is not it. You've had less education courses than chiropractors and doctors, and here you are giving nutrition advice. Maybe we should say, well, that's what worked for me. So people know it's not really gold standard. It's not really science. But we know for athletes, that is not the case, that they definitely need more than that. Even our geriatric population needs more than that. So yeah, I mean, those first couple of classes, you just got to take them with a grain of salt, especially if you want to work with athletes. If you are an athlete, you've got to realize that's not for the niche population of sports, honestly.
Yeah, if you're trying to build muscle, like I think she was, I don't know, in college, 125, 130 pounds.
Okay.
But 2 times body weight squat and deadlifter, right? So
yeah, she needs a little more than that.
She's going to need more than 50, 60 grams of plant protein, because she's like, she looked at them and called us on, and she's like, this is wrong. I have more than 50, 60 grams in protein shakes plus my meat.
My doctor asks me all the time, how many grams are you eating? I'm like, 135, and I've been doing it for more than 5 years, and I'm not dead. My kidneys are fine.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really too bad. because she left and went the biology route instead of nutrition,
Okay.
and then working at a pharmaceutical company. But
All right.
it kind of really dissuaded her. So that's tough.
Yeah.
What one of the things we talk about with any program, whether you're lifting or nutrition, I say the best plan is the one that you stick to. So talk about how it's different when you're dealing with younger kids in high school, right?
Sure.
And then you go to college, parents aren't cooking for you, or maybe you're eating with a team, or you have different set meals. But talk about what are some of the first things you try to adjust or fix, or that small little habits you're making for the high school kids, and then also for the college kids.
Sure. Typically with my high school kids, the first thing I need to fix is eating enough.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them are under eating.
Skipping breakfast.
Significantly. Yeah. And not just female athletes anymore. We see it across the board. They just don't know how much they need. And they've just, like you said, always done this. And so it's worked. I always tell them, okay, you've always done this, but if we keep doing what we've always done, we'll always get what we've always gotten. So if you want to be a better athlete, we've got to change something. How do you know that tweaking this in your nutrition isn't going to be what pushes that a little farther forward for you? With my college athletes, it's typically food choices. They're eating in dorm cafeterias and they're just grabbing whatever's quick and they're not thinking about it. Maybe they're eating with the team and, we've got parents providing for them, or we're stopping at restaurants that are ideal. Just having individuals who are choosing the restaurant or choosing the food that maybe isn't ideal for an athlete in that time period. So making those little tweaks that if here's what you're presented with, here are your best options, so that they can start to tweak just the choices they're making. First and foremost, and then we start working on whatever their individual issues are from there, hydration, amount, etc.
Once they're in their own apartment, they're not in the dorm anymore. Now they have some more control over their grocery list, right?
Yeah.
Then it also takes the time because they have the meal prep, right? So you got to teach them that too. And the meal prep, it depends, right? You might cook steaks and eat steaks for lunch and dinner every day, and that's it, because college kids are college kids.
Yeah.
How do you manage that, or what are some tips you offer with them?
So for time's sake, we typically will kind of do a piecemeal meal prep. So instead of making 2 or 3 different recipes and spreading that out over the week, we'll cook off some chicken and some ground turkey or ground beef. We'll cook off some rice and potatoes, and then we'll mix and match that throughout the week to make different things. Maybe we're taking the ground beef and we're putting it in a tortilla with some cheese and lettuce, and then we're throwing the rice on the side. And then the next night, maybe we're having a chicken breast with barbecue sauce and some potatoes. So kind of teaching them how to just make ingredients at the beginning of the week, and then matching those ingredients to be meals throughout the rest of the week. So they get some variation in their food, but we're not doing massive amounts of cooking. So just even letting them know, hey, if we're sticking chicken breasts in the oven and we're making ground beef on top of the stove, and then we're boiling some rice in the back corner, and we've got some microwave potatoes, we can be done meal prepping in less than an hour. True. So really just helping them see how to manage that time, so that it can be as much made as possible in the smallest amount of time frame. They're more likely to do it that way, which honestly, I don't blame them.
Sure. That's fine for me, actually,
Yeah.
Obviously there's different levels of dedication and, consequently success. Mm-hmm. For someone early on, they might not even know what a protein is versus a fat, right? So you got to teach them, the basics.
Yeah.
But after a while, as your level of performance elevates, that margin gets smaller, and you got to be able to operate at a higher level, right?
Yeah.
And at the highest level, there's that perfectionism, which not attainable, right?
Not always beneficial either.
Right. Absolutely not, because then it just stresses you out, and then the excess stress raises your cortisol level, and then retaining fat and all that crap. So do you govern athletes with, hey, here's a good margin of error. Here's some good margin. Like if you're 80% compliant or 60% or whatever, what's your approach with that? Because like you said, just constantly making some improvement over time, stacking those wins is what builds the athlete.
Yeah.
Not being perfect one day and tanking the next.
Yeah. We just try to aim for consistency first off. So if we're hitting it 50% of the time, we're hitting it 50% of the time every week. And then can we aim for 60% next week? And we just slowly step our way up. I honestly don't like my athletes to get anywhere near perfectionism. I'm an 80-20 girl. We need to enjoy our life. We need to have times and situations. Oh, sorry, my lights just turned off. We need to have times and situations where we are enjoying our food. We're getting to have birthday cake and we're having, Thanksgiving and not feeling like we need to stress about it. Because you're right, that extra stress adds to cortisol. Cortisol alters our body composition, and that's not something we want as an athlete. So just making sure that they're consistent and that we're taking stair steps there. And then with the perfectionists, because I've had a few, we've got to almost kind of step things back down. You've got to teach them food. It's okay to eat a cookie every now and then. It's okay to have a little sugar. Here's when it's best timed. And, just kind of teaching them to take the reins, but hold them loosely, if that makes sense. We don't need to constantly be gripping everything so tight, and that's not going to add to your performance. So just trying to keep them consistent and then taking baby steps from there. So, if it's 50%, it's 50%. And we just work our way towards getting as close to that goal as we can. When we've maxed out on that goal and I think they're probably just not going to get better on it, then we focus on something else. I don't like to harp on things that make them feel like they're failing, because then we're not going to do those things, right? If I'm expecting you to be perfect and you're hitting your macros every day, 7 days a week, and you're hitting it 4, and I just keep saying, no, we've got to hit it 7, you're just going to give up on me and we're just going to blow up the whole thing and you're not going to come back and we're not going to make any progress. So I'm kind of atypical as far as dietitians go. I'm a little type B like that. If we're not hitting it this way, let's come at it from a different angle. So let's not keep harping on something that's not going anywhere.
Yeah, when you hold them to that perfection standard, that's the opposite of satisfying.
Yeah.
And that's why that habit breaks. And coming at the athlete from a different direction, that's where the artwork, not just what the textbook says, comes in.
And I can't expect them to do something that I realistically won't do. I mean, they're going to see me eating candy. I have a sweet tooth. So, I can't say don't eat that. And then they turn around and they see me eating a big cookie at lunch. That's a problem.
Right. With the guys and girls, I see it with the kids in my gym that I work with, their high school kids. Yeah. And I see, like, even their different sexes, they still have a lot of the same issues. But one thing I see, we got 4 girls out of my house, and I got nieces and even grown adults, women, every year will come to my gym and they'll say, I don't want to get bulky. Now I'm at the point where I'll say, you're not good enough to get bulky. All right.
That's a good answer. I love that.
I have to be almost offensive for them to understand that they're not going to. Like, if you start getting bulky, then we'll change some things, eat less and not lift as much, but they're so far away from it. But from a performance standpoint with, middle school or junior high and high school kids, you'll have people that need to eat more to put on size because sports is a game of force, right? Yeah. But then also they'll be worried about how they appear to the opposite sex. Am I going to be good looking or not? Right.
Well, and you've got parents who are under totally different societal pressures. You've got moms who are under pressure to look thin and petite and all of these things that society expects. And they're putting those diet ideas on their athlete high school daughter. So now she thinks she needs to eat to be thin like mom, but you're outperforming mom 400%. So right. Yeah. It's tough. Sometimes it's about having conversations with the moms.
Really, it is. It can be. Wow. And then even when we're working with adults on their nutrition, if the spouse isn't on board as well, now there's additional friction, right? Mm-hmm. There could be some self-sabotage or some sabotage there, so that could be tough. So when we say teamwork's a core value, that's why. Because for me to perform well at home, like I need extra, or in the kitchen, I need help there as well.
Yeah.
I need support because I'm not good enough by myself. Yeah. And in the gym as well. So what do you say to like guys or girls that say, hey, I don't want to get bulky, but I've seen college volleyball players smashing that ball. They're not skinny and tiny. Basketball players too, softball. And then on the male side, same thing, that they're really, the phrase out of West Side is weak things break,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So what do you say to those families and say, hey, this is really what needs to happen?
So I start by kind of getting a feel for what they're eating, like where are we at even,
Yep.
and then presenting what the calories realistically look like to the parents. A lot of times, in those cases, the parents are familiar with it. Maybe they've calorie counted themselves. We've gotten ourselves in this diet mentality. And so they have an idea of what that looks like. And I'm like, so here's where you're eating. Here's where you need to be. And, a lot of times, especially the reactions with my male athletes' parents is, but he's eating so much already. And I'm like, yeah, but he needs to eat even more.
Right.
With the female clients, a lot of times being a bodybuilder myself, I think kind of helps because, my high school female athletes will ask me questions like, how do you get those biceps? How do you build those glutes? Things like that. And I'm like, you got to eat. Like, you don't make that muscle in the gym. You're making it in the kitchen. I love trainers. I love strength and conditioning coaches. You know that, Lucas. But y'all can't do anything if they ain't getting the food to do it, right?
Oh, I know that.
So,
More
yeah.
than anybody.
Yeah. So I just, telling them if this is your goal, here's what you need to do. And sometimes it even comes down to presenting, here's what Olympic athletes in your sport are eating. Here's what, elite athletes in your sport are eating. This is their caloric intake. Granted, they're doing this for a living. They're working out all day long, but not presenting that fact because you kind of want to gloss over that, right? You don't want them to think about, oh, well, they're doing more exercise than me, so I haven't earned that. I hate those words. But, it just, okay, so they're eating this much. They're in my sport. They're my position, and I'm eating this much. So if I want to be there, I need to do some work. And, a lot of times they get happy when they realize they get to eat more food. And when they start doing it and then they're hungry, they're like, oh, I could eat even more. And you're like, yes, let's keep bringing on more food, So, yeah, I mean, that's probably one of my favorite parts of my job. I love helping athletes bulk. Like, let's put on some mass. Let's eat more food. I spent so many years of my career telling people to eat less, do more, eat less, do more. I hate that. That's not how we do things, So let's fuel what we are doing so that we can reach the goals that we're at.
There's clearly a difference between, eating to be healthy and well-rounded with a moderate lifestyle and a moderate level of exercise.
Yeah.
Then when you're competing at the college and then the pro level, like competing is typically not overly healthy.
No.
Right? You're putting yourself through tremendous mental and physical stress to perform in some kind of endeavor. And in your world, the bodybuilding world, those last 6 weeks, especially those last 2 weeks or more, like you don't want to be around anybody going through that cut, especially going through that water cut.
And it's just not, it's not a healthy sport when it comes to prep. Like it's not. That's why I tell my athletes, we get in and we get out. We don't spend large amounts of time there because it's not healthy. And we know that, and I think that's the nice part about it is it helps me like relate to my wrestlers, right? Because they use all these inappropriate weight altering techniques. And so, let's talk about how we can get closer to that weight on a more consistent basis. So we're not using these techniques that bodybuilders use a few times a year, every week.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember when I did my first bodybuilding competition, it was new to me because I was like 200 pounds. And Sammy, I'm not a tall guy.
Right.
I mean, I'm 5'7", and, I'm 200 pounds. And when I first started, I started eating way more than what I was already eating. I was like, wait a minute. Hey, I thought I was having a hard time putting it down. I was sweating, eating, and I was
staying
eating
up
way
all
more.
night trying to get the food in.
Yeah. And I was like, I thought I was supposed to be cutting because I was just eating ungodly amounts of food. And then, eventually got real low, but
okay. Lucky. I spent 4 months under 1,000 calories. It was a nightmare.
That's tough. I didn't spend that much time under. I spent like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
And in the
it's
strongman
definitely
world,
not a healthy sport. It's not a model athletes should strive for.
Right.
And when I was living that strongman life, it was 1,000 calories a meal.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah.
And people talk about like Brian Shaw with his 14,000 calories a day. I'm like, do you guys realize Michael Phelps was taken in the same amount? Completely different sport.
Yeah.
14 grand a day. He's like,
completely different appearance as well.
right.
Aesthetically.
Yep. Same height.
Yep.
Same height.
Yeah.
You know, I looked up on your on Parkview's site about their offerings and their services.
Yeah.
And one of the things I was curious about, Mickey Marotti talked about it at Ohio State, that they use the DEXA scan, and we use in-body scans. So, I have a rudimentary knowledge of the DEXA. What I know is what's a little bit different is about the bone density. But can you talk a little bit about that service and what that scan does and how you guys utilize it?
Yeah. So we actually have both now. We have an in-body and a DEXA. The in-body that we have is probably a little more advanced than maybe one of the ones you've seen. It does some phase angle measurements, so it tells us the health of the individual cell, so we can kind of estimate the health of the human body as a whole. But the DEXA compared to an in-body, which most people have experienced in one way or another, whether they've just seen one in a health food store or they've had one done. The DEXA uses x-rays. So instead of using a electric pulse that passes through the skin and then through the water stored in the body, like with an in-body, the DEXA kind of creates x-ray slices of the body. So it can get a better picture, and that's why we can get bone density out of it. So we get bone density out of it. Now, we don't really use it for that in our health system because we have a diagnostic DEXA in the system, but we get a basic full body bone density. We also get a little more exact picture of body fat compared to muscle, lean tissue, and then bone composition as well. Reason behind that is the DEXAs aren't as affected by fluid balance. So because we're not using a electric pulse traveling through that water that's stored in the muscle, we're not going to see alterations based on your fluid status when you come in the way that we would with an in-body. That's why DEXAs are considered gold standard for body composition. It used to be underwater weighing, but most people, A, don't have access to that. B, it's really expensive. And who wants to have their nose clamped and breathe through a little tube while being submerged underwater completely, right? Most people aren't going to enjoy that. So a little easier just to lay on a table, have an arm pass over you with your legs kind of clamped together with straps. But it does allow us to get a better picture. And what we really like using it for right now is kind of monitoring injuries. So after we've had maybe an ACL and we've had a revision of it, we can go in and monitor how the physical therapy the athlete's getting is causing that bone and muscle to remodel, to make sure that we're doing what's best for them as far as treatment plans go, and making sure that we're getting good nutrition in. So we kind of use it multifaceted. We use it for bone density in those athletes who may be under eating, be at risk for the female triad, or what we now call red S. And we also use it to monitor injuries.
It's got to be good intel. So you tear your ACL before you go and have that fixed. You can do a scan and see what your muscle mass is on both legs. Yeah. And then once it atrophies for lack of use for a few months when you're rehabbing, you can see how it comes down, measured again, and then you know what to work back towards to get it back to where you were pre-injury is one thing.
And we also use it with our strength and conditioning coaches. Like if I see one of Lucas's athletes and that athlete has a big discrepancy between the right and left leg as far as muscle mass goes, I can go to him and say, hey, this athlete really needs to be working, the right side a little more to bring that up to match the left, so we're not at risk for injuries of over or under usage. Mm-hmm. So I can use it to also kind of help guide training to make sure that we're preventing injury in our athletes too.
You've worked directly with some of my athletes too, and they they definitely benefit from that. And it's what am I trying to say here? It's almost, especially our female athletes, right after you come around and you talk and you have these conversations with our athletes, not just even about like injuries and stuff, but like when you spend time with them, they come back in the weight room and usually they're like blown away about what they can't eat and how much it's going to help them.
I love that.
And we've had a lot more success with our female athletes in the weight room, I'll say, after they
You
see
had
you.
some great female athlete progressions.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I've really focused on doing, because for a while where I'm at, that wasn't a focus at all.
Yeah.
Was because females tend to get overlooked in sports and training, nutrition, and spend a little bit more time with them. You get them to buy in, you'll get a lot of people to buy in.
Yeah, I mean, the science is relatively newer in the female athlete than it is the male. We used to just kind of throw out the female data because it was an anomaly. And so now we've got researchers that are specifically researching just females and how does the cycle affect their training and their recovery and their nutrition needs. And I love that you've really grabbed onto that and you really help to cater to that population.
How do you work? You mentioned the triad earlier. How do you maneuver around that whenever, that's brought up?
So you mean it just like an athlete discussing it, or if we have someone who's kind of at risk?
Someone that's at risk, even how do you talk about, in generally, how would you talk to an athlete about it and compared to how you handle it with someone that's actually going through it?
Yeah. So
that's important for people that are going to be listening.
Absolutely. So the red S is multifaceted. So typically the athlete will come to me. They've got reoccurring injuries. They've been seen by their athletic trainer multiple times. Athletic trainers kind of probed a little bit, how you eating? How's recovery going? Things like that to kind of feel out, are we not eating well enough? In the case of a female, are we having a cycle? Is it regular? Do we even know? A lot of times we find they're not having a cycle. They're happy about it because, hey, if I don't have to have a period every month, why would I be upset, right? So they're not getting their cycle. They're not eating sufficiently. Sometimes it's enough for an average human sedentary woman, but it's not enough for what they're doing. They've been chronically under eating and they're constantly coming in injured, typically reoccurring injuries. Maybe we're seeing stress fractures. I'll get my hands on them usually after all that's happened. Maybe we've even had a DEXA to kind of look at the bone density, see what's going on there. If we've got, stress fracture risk. And then we sit down and we just kind of talk, where are you at? Where have you been? What's your frame of mind around food? Have you always grown up in a household where mom said we have to eat clean? We have to only have healthy foods in the house. We don't do sugar. We don't do gluten. We're cutting out food groups. What is their mentality around it? Are we approaching it from disordered eating, or are we approaching it from this is accidental, that I just didn't know that I needed more? I was eating what I was eating when I was 12. I started being active. I didn't realize I needed to get more. We've just worked our way into a deficit, but I have a great frame of mind around food. And so figuring out where they're at, am I okay with food and I'm okay with introducing more? I just didn't know I could. Or do I honestly have some disordered thoughts around food? This food group and that food group shouldn't be eaten, and we shouldn't eat these things, and we should avoid that, and I need to eat less so that I can look aesthetically pleasing. Are we coming from a sport that is weight dependent? Because that's going to make a huge difference too. So gymnasts, wrestlers, those ones that have to meet certain weight classes or have pressures to remain smaller, flyers and cheerleading. So kind of feeling out what their situation is, where they're at, and then we just kind of build from that. So if you're not having your cycle, let's talk about why that's important to have a cycle. It is the barometer of health in women. If we're not having one, we know nothing about your health. And we also know that you're not forming great bone. And this is kind of the time to do that, right? So we want to make sure that we're maximizing that. We talk about how if we keep following the path that we're following, we're going to continue to get injured. If we continue to get injured, we're going to stop playing. How important is your sport to you? Sometimes they say, honestly, I don't love this and I don't want to be doing it anymore. Okay, so let's just help get you to a healthy place. Let's not even worry about sport. And other times it's, this is what I want to do. I want to play at the elite levels. Okay, well, you can't get there if you're constantly injured. So how do we fix that? So focusing on the things that are most pertinent to them at that point, which usually is that injury. So how do we fix that injury? Typically, it's going to be we need more food, right? And then we talk about adding those kind of things in. We start treating that injury first, so that once we've treated the injury, that trust me, we've built that relationship and they're like, okay, she kind of knows what she's doing. Let's see what else we can work on. She fixed this, maybe she can fix that. I'm not sleeping well. I'm not recovering well. I'm constantly sore. Okay, so let's work on that, right? So slowly building in those different thought process, talking about why we shouldn't skip different food groups. What does each food group do for us? Do you have actual intolerances that we need to have diagnosed? In which case, how can we make up for those through other things? So it's really meeting the athlete where they're at and just kind of feeling out what's our first step. Where are those issues that was causing this to become a problem in the first place, so that we can fix that and then progress from there.
Also, you brought it up, and it's just because I'm curious about it. What changes when you have a female come in that's on birth control or not on birth control? Does that affect how you address their nutrition and how they go about athletics and nutrition, stuff like that?
Yeah. So with an individual who's on birth control, diagnosing issues in their nutrition can be a little harder because we're not typically going to see those alterations in the cycle that would indicate an issue sooner. So sometimes we don't catch a problem until we're further down the line. It's a much bigger issue. But they don't need to make as much differences in their nutrition as a woman who isn't on birth control, because we're altering that hormone profile to be more like those first 2 weeks consistently throughout the length of the cycle, and then basically kind of doing a hormone dump at the end so that we have that period. So they don't need to alter their nutrition cyclically like a woman who isn't on it. Those women are going to need to, increase nutrition on those last 2 weeks to make up for some of those deficits. Estrogen is the primary hormone in women that helps with muscle building. And it is peaking during that period, but so is progesterone, which is catabolic. So it's causing us to break down muscle at a greater level than we are building muscle. And so we're kind of digging ourselves in a hole. So nutritionally, we have to dig ourselves out of that by increasing our intake of carbohydrates, a little extra protein, timing it around workouts, and then utilizing some carefully placed supplements to help with any symptoms that might get in the way of our performance as well. So we do have to make some alterations in women who are having a natural cycle versus those who are going on a cycle that is controlled. And then again, we've got to look at which birth control, because some of them do cycle a little bit hormone wise. So you kind of have to feel out what pill they're on and how are things changing for them.
That's great. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
Obviously, with a bachelor's and a master's degree, plenty of, book study, plenty of lectures getting crammed in your head, right?
Yeah.
But you're still continuing, continual learning. Any books you've been through, podcasts, seminars, people you follow that, this person really puts out good material. I've learned a lot from this person. Anybody you would recommend?
Yeah. Stacy, I think her last name's Sims. I got the book right here. Yeah. Stacy Sims. She's really great for female athletes. So she is the top researcher as far as female nutrition goes for athletes. She has a book called Roar that I absolutely love. I use it a lot and refer to it with my female athletes. She just introduced a new one for menopausal women because she had this huge push for that. So I haven't gotten my hands on it yet, but I'm really excited to see it. And then every year I get to go to a nice conference where all of us sports dietitians get together, which is really awesome because we just kind of nerd out. But there's always a couple of researchers coming from the UK that are in the nutrigenomics region that I love reading their research articles. It's a little much for the average person to get their hands on and kind of delve through because there's a lot going on there. But yeah, I mean, honestly, there's some sports nutrition handbooks. Nancy Clark writes some really good stuff. She's kind of the grandfather of nutrition for athletes. So she writes some really great, awesome books that are pretty simply written. She does kind of a bucket mentality with her athletes. So here's your morning bucket, your afternoon bucket, your dinner bucket, and you're going to kind of fill those up to, meet your needs for the day. And so she does some really great illustrations with her athletes to kind of get the concepts that are pretty difficult through to them. So it's usually one of the ones that I recommend for someone who's kind of looking to just get in at the base with athletic nutrition and kind of just get a better feel for things, because
Awesome.
she makes it really easy to understand.
One of the questions I had here for you was dealing with teammates and for looking for some tips. And you wrote, one of the things that's helped you is a refined sense of empathy. Clearly not sympathy, right? And I find, athletes will sometimes come in and they're trying to, in my assessment, manipulate how you feel, that you're sympathetic with them so you feel the same way. And then you say, hey, it's okay what you're doing, right? When really it's not, right? So how do you manage that with, because you have to build rapport and trust, and then extra more and more of those reps leads to more confidence. But when they come in and they're trying to get you to buy in, hey man, I only have time for a chicken biscuit sandwich on the way to school for breakfast, and he plays linebacker. He's going to play in the Big Ten, and I'm like, bro, that's not it. That's not it. So how do you, other than just taking that kid and saying, dude, what the hell are you doing? Get your head out of your ass.
Yeah, I mean, Lucas will probably attest to, I'm kind of known for my honesty with my athletes. Like, I'll meet you where you are, but we're gonna kind of do it my way. Like, I can't be there to cook for you. I'd love to, but I lay it out for him. So that's great that this is all you've got and that this is what you're doing. And I love that you're doing breakfast. I love that you're getting something in. That's a great start. And I understand not having a lot of time, but let's maximize the nutrition we get in that time. So, if a chicken biscuit is all you've got time for, so you've got time for the drive-through, right? Okay. So let's make some healthier choices there. So is there a Starbucks on the way? Is there a Dunkin' on the way? Because they've got turkey, sausage, and egg white sandwiches that are going to be a better option. So let's hit somewhere like that we can get something that's got the same kind of foods that you're eating, but a healthier version of them, so that we can make little tweaks in those things. Or, okay, so if you've got time for the drive-thru, you've got time for the microwave, right? So let's get this particular type of pre-made sandwich out of the freezer section, and you can pop them in before you go, and it can just go out the door with you. Or here's what we can keep in our bag, so that you've got things to make a meal out of when you don't have time like that. So I get, I like to approach them where they're at. I understand what you got time for, but in reality, here's what we need. So how do we bridge that gap between the two? And then helping them make those connections to get from where they are to where I kind of need them to be.
Because at the end of the day, it still takes what it takes. And if you play linebacker and you tell me, and your parents are saying he eats a ton, well, he wants to play linebacker at the D1 level and he weighs 195. No,
that college is going to ask you to gain weight before you even get there.
Yeah, and if you don't, I'm sure that strength coach they'll be weighing you in every day.
Yeah,
seeing where you're at, and if you're not trending up at all, you're not making it off the practice squad.
And you're going to be in the dietitian's office anyway, so you might as well start with me here.
You might as well, because they won't put you on the field because they know you can't handle the load.
Yeah.
How about eating and that's just like in the morning and stuff. What about recovery? Games on Friday nights, games on Saturdays.
I want to go home. I want to drink. I want to have pizza. I want to eat subs.
Right. And then college kids, hey man, we won. Time to party. Right. There's a culture. I deal with a lot of rugby kids, and there's one school I won't mention, but when they win, they pass around this cowboy boot that they fill with beer. And they all got a chug out of it. Right. So that's obviously not optimal, but pretty funny. But just getting people to eat a little bit to recover. Talk about just a couple things that will help with recovery.
So recovery, the big thing here is carbs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, athletes think it's protein, and protein is amazing. Don't get me wrong, but we don't do enough carbs in the post-workout series. So, I let them know it's kind of like a car. If I gave you a car for free and I hand you the keys, but I didn't put any gas in it, is it going to be much fun? Right? You're going to have to do some work to make that car be enjoyable. But if I put some gas in that car, suddenly I can have a lot of fun with it. It's the same with muscle building. If we think of protein as being, the engine of the car, it's great by itself, but it can't run the car and provide the fuel for the car. So it's got to be one or the other. And so we need to throw those carbs on top of it. So, I always tell my athletes, if you have a sweet tooth, if you like those less healthy carbs, let's say Pop-Tarts, like we were talking about that being a healthy breakfast, it's great in that post-workout period.
For sure.
Maybe if that's where you want to have those things, they're quick, easy to digest, and therefore they're going to get into the bloodstream, into the muscle faster. we're going to be primed to take on that nutrition. So, granola bars, Rice Krispie treats,
Sure. All that
small
stuff.
amounts of Skittles, fruit snacks, honey, those kind of things are what we really need to be focused on in that time period.
They don't realize that protein, which will have a higher fat content, takes a little bit longer to digest.
Yeah, not going to get where it needs to be as soon.
And your body wants some other things to recover really quickly. So getting some carbs in there quickly helps it kind of heal. And then you want to build, so a little bit later, half hour later, 45 minutes later,
and our strength and stop and go athletes, I mean, that's what you run on, is the carbohydrate stored in your muscle. If we're not replacing that, we're not going to be prepared to go the next time.
No. One of the things you listed here for recovery, obviously there's the mobility, stretching, yoga, so you're getting your muscles to do what they need to do. But you wrote time management also. So that's one thing. If you are more organized, you can get more done.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But what about the component of, you know what? I don't need to be perfect and get all the shit done. Maybe I only need 80%. So maybe I need to eliminate some things. Get that out of the system. I don't need to do everything. I have some more downtime. I can then recover. Talk about what you meant by time management and for performing, and then obviously recovering and adding less stress because you're more organized.
Yeah. I mean, for me, recovery was always the first thing to go. When I get busy, I forget to stretch. I forget to roll, and then I get injured. And now I've got to take time to do PT. And then I don't want to do that either. So I learned that, especially as I've gotten older, I just need to, you're right, sort out the things that just really don't get the job done for me. What are the things that I'm wasting time on that aren't contributing to my career, aren't contributing to my sport, aren't contributing to the things I need to get done to function on a daily basis? Weed those things out and then start building it in. For me, I really had to schedule my recovery because otherwise I don't get it done. So having my coach build it into my programming so that if I don't get it done, I feel guilty because it wasn't done and it's on my program really helped a lot for me, because then I prioritized it a lot more. Whereas if it was just something I knew in the back of my mind needed to get done, it wasn't happening until I saw the PTs and they were like, hey, you need to be doing your work. That's why you're constantly down here. So really just making sure that I was scheduling the things that were important, that I was clearing things that weren't, was what helped me 100% with that. That's why I listed time management as being so important for me for recovery, because I have to make time for it. I have to schedule it in my schedule. What we do in sports is so varied hour-wise. I mean, my job could start anywhere from 6:30 in the morning to when a team leaves the field and heads home for the evening. So making sure that, I really have that on my list of things to do and get it checked off is really important for me, because otherwise it just doesn't get done. It falls to the wayside, and then I end up a big, naughty, angry mess.
Right. One of the, it's hard because you're giving them knowledge, but you're also asked to inspire athletes to move forward. And right or wrong, athletes oftentimes are, competitive, right?
Yeah.
So I make it a competition. Hey, this person's going to outwork you. This person's going to treat their recovery in the next 10 minutes as a workout or as a training session.
Yeah.
And they're beating you on the mashing and the foam rolling. They're beating you on having their food ready to consume in the car on the way home.
Yeah.
And if you watch Tom Brady's The Man in the Arena, they're always back and forth. Hey, I'm getting an edge on you. I'm getting an edge here. I watch more film. But I'm getting an edge on my recovery. I got more treatment today.
Yeah.
I went saw the trainer.
Doing that at one of the high schools I work with here in town. So I came in. They want me to come in every month to their strength and conditioning class just to be present, answer questions, help the athletes. And one of the things I noticed was none of them had water bottles in class. It was, I think overall we saw like 32% of their athletes were bringing water bottles to the class, and they only have one free period. So, it was a pretty good amount of athletes that weren't. So we created a visual chart for them so that they mark every day whether or not everyone at their station. So they're holding each other accountable. They're getting to compete with the other, classes as well as other stations in their class as to who's bringing their water, who's got it with them. We created a little kind of hallway game. So the two coaches of the class, anytime they catch an athlete in their class out in the hallway without their water bottle, they have to immediately give them push-ups or, squats or something to kind of, challenge each other. And so they're using it against the coaches too, so I caught Coach Murph without his water bottle, give me your push-ups. So they're loving it. It's great to get them to compete and push against each other to do things that they should be doing anyway.
Right. And you'll see at a higher level, people are walking around with gallon jugs all the time. They're dragging them with them, and they're going to practice, and they're bringing their own little cooler because, they know it takes what it takes, and they're going to put themselves through a ton. So they got to, fuel and recover, because that's all part of it, right? Yeah. It's definitely not the sexy part, but it makes as much of an impact as anything else, right?
It does, definitely.
Yep. Well, you said you're on 2 tours of duty so far with Parkview. Any plans for the next, 5-10 years or horizon for you guys? Tell us what's going on.
I mean, I'd love to work with an AHL or NFL team, but I love where I'm at right now. I want to grow this department. So right now it's one me for all of our schools and our universities and all of our athletic teams. I'd ideally like to be able to provide those schools with the kind of care that some of the Big Ten teams get. They've got a dietitian stationed at their university that covers 2 or 3 teams. And then there's one for each of them. So you really build that relationship with the athletes. You get to spend more time with them. Have a dietitian that's covering a couple of our high schools so they can spend a couple days every week there and be more involved in the athletes, get to really know them as people. That way they can kind of alter their choices, eat lunch with them, help with those kind of things, educate. So we're working our way there. We're getting busier and busier.
Cool.
I only stretch so far,
Sure. There's only so much time, and you have to prioritize.
Yes.
Any off the wall or something, hey Jim, you won't believe what I recommended for this group, but it works, and it was required.
Yeah.
And the reason I asked that is that one of our coaches, Chad Dockery, great dude, football player. He's an athletic director down at Rice Memorial in Evansville. And he was coaching my son. He coaches in high school, and Jack was trying to gain weight.
Okay.
And we would tell him what to do, but when it comes from your parents, it's not necessarily as received. So, but Chad would say, "Hey, dude, just start drinking bomb shakes." And I go, "What's in that, buddy?" He goes, "Basically whatever you want, but it's going to have a few key criteria. There's going to be whole milk, some ice cream, right? 50 to 75 grams of protein in scoops, right? And then anything else you want." And I'm like, "Give me an example." He goes, "You want to put raw eggs in there? Put raw eggs in there. You want to put Oreos in there? You want to put cereal in there?
Yeah.
Oreo cookies, syrup, chocolate syrup, pancake syrup. I don't care, but make sure you're having at least 1 to 2 of those a day."
Yeah.
So I started, I watched Jack make one of those. I watched what he put in there. I added up the ingredients, and I was like, "That's 1,600 calories all in one shot, man."
And it's liquids. It's so easy to get in.
Yeah. So he slams it down and then goes to bed, and I'm like, "Oh my God, how are you not gaining weight?" Right. So anything unusual, hey, this is not really in the textbook, but this is what you got to do.
I mean, I'll have athletes who want to gain mass, and we talk about adding milk powder to everything, whole milk, butter, cream, mayo, just load it on, right? Every opportunity you've got to add a condiment, let's do it.
Sure.
But probably my favorite recommendation that I make that all of the coaches and students are like, "Oh, she told us to eat this," is telling them, intra workout, if you hit a wall, grab some candy.
Yeah.
Pure sugar. I don't want nuts. I don't want chocolate. Just grab some candy, grab some Skittles, grab some gummy bears. Now's your opportunity to put some junk in. The coaches and the parents are always like, "Oh, should we be telling them to do that?" I'm like, yeah, we should.
Yeah.
I just love the reactions that you get from kids when you tell them to do that. But yeah, I mean, all the time we're doing things like that. Like if you've got a mass gainer who isn't eating well, we just start loading them full of things. Like have a bowl of ice cream every night.
Right.
And I love working with my female athletes who, want to gain weight. And we start talking about, add this or add some cookies in the evening. What's your favorite sweet? Let's add that, adding some of those things back in that we typically don't think of as being healthy foods to meet what we need to meet by keeping volume down. We've got to get really creative when you've got an athlete who just can't put more food in. But, like you said, your son needs to get that many calories in. We got to start adding it somehow. So how do we do that? We start adding all the things that people think are unhealthy.
And when they start saying they're full, they're not lying. They typically are. So then it's calories per bite.
Yeah,
So
it's a full-time job.
Can you put mayonnaise on? Can you put guacamole on?
Yep.
And then to get that extra fat calories.
Yep.
You're right about the gummy bears. You'll see, like in the powerlifting strongman world, when you're maxing out and you crash,
Yeah.
they'll have those gummy worms. Or if it's hot out, they want them salted too. So you have so you're holding that water. So those kind of fast acting sugars go a long way in that instance.
Yeah.
That's not the cornerstone of your diet. That's not the
No.
cornerstone of how you eat, but you're trying to perform in this moment.
Right.
Yeah, something quick, right? Yeah. Right. I don't know if Lucas, you had any other questions, but it's been a lot of fun, and I always have these rapid fire ones at the end, which kind of like gets people to know our guests a little bit more.
Hard. I'm not gonna lie; those were hard to answer.
So I said, like, when you're lifting, what do you like to listen to?
Murder.
And you wrote
podcast.
a wide variety of music, but also murder podcasts. Like the last thing I want to be thinking about when I'm squatting is like, did that person do it? Holy shit, did they do it? Like, and then you're squatting, and I'm like, who's gonna be thinking about that? I can't be thinking about that and concentrating somewhere else.
Oh, I'm listening to people being dismembered and bodies being found the whole time I'm squatting and deadlifting. And
No. Holy shit, man! I can't believe that works. All right. Bucket list. I want to hike the Swiss Alps. Have you been to Europe?
I have been to Europe, but I have not been to the Alps. I haven't been to Switzerland all yet. It's been more around the Germany, Italy, France type area.
Gotcha. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
The favorite sports movie. This one just came out a couple weeks ago, and I saw it.
It was so good.
It was excellent, right? Talk about inspiring.
Yes. Oh, it was so good.
Grit, teamwork, burning the boats literally where you have no other options other than to perform, right? Tons of lessons there based on a true story of those University of Washington rowers, but that's your favorite. It's not Rudy. It's not Hoosiers. Major League.
No.
Come on. The Natural. The Boys in the Boat. All right.
That's what the movie's called, The Boys in the Boat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of commentary on people in general. I mean, not just the sport aspects and the dedication, but just what those boys had to go through as part of their life on top of that at the end. I mean, just, yeah.
How about when they're getting cheated or getting fucked by different groups, different entities, like organizational entities that run the entire sport?
Yep.
Like, life's not fair.
Yeah.
Right? Too bad. Find a way.
Exactly.
So then you follow that up with your favorite sport, Bobby Orr. Well, who throws that out there? Old time hockey legend.
I mean, I'm older than I look.
That's what Lucas said.
He was. He's one of the greats, and he's one of the reasons I fell in love with the sport. I love hockey. So I was a ballet dancer when I was younger, and hockey strikes me as a violent ballet. There's a lot of manliness to it, but there's a lot of grace as well. And I just think he played the game extremely well.
Ballerina, that's another hard on the nutrition sport.
Yeah.
Right? Dang.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
Yep. Then we go into the favorite books. Now we're into fantasy, Bridge of Terabithia.
And Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. Okay. Truth be told, I've been through that series. I read the books and watched the movies.
Nice.
Yeah.
Books are better than the movies, but they did a really good job sticking true to it.
Always, right?
Yep.
Superheroes, Jane Foster and the Scarlet Witch.
I have a thing with Valkyries. So Jane Foster in it, she becomes the head of the Valkyries, and I just think that kind of position for women is pretty badass. Excuse my language, but
right.
And the Scarlet Witch, she's just cool. She's a.
They whip some ass.
Well, but she's one of those characters that's good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
But she's not necessarily bad by her own doing. Like, people manipulated her there, so.
Usually people don't start off right out of the womb being assholes.
Not generally.
No, usually there's a bunch of horrible things that happen to them, and they don't handle it
coming
as
from the
well as they
serial
could.
killer world, there are a few that I think popped out that way, but
I'll start thinking about that next time I'm squatting.
yeah.
Well, I know how it goes for you.
I'll recommend some podcasts for you.
Do you listen to Crime Junkie?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Crime Junkie's pretty good.
Yeah.
They're out of Indiana, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
And
what
she
I thought.
has one called The Deck that actually focuses on the
Was-
playing cards that they use in prisons
Yeah.
with the pictures of missing people to see if they can find any leads on the cases.
There is a Crime Junkie episode where they found some dead people in Fort Wayne in
Yeah.
the sewers. Did you listen to that one?
Yep.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Favorite thing to work on is back. I like that because I say strong back, strong everything. And if you had
Definitely
10 million,
my strongest body part.
it's usually one of the most neglected for athletes. Their whole posterior, hamstrings and
they
butt
can't see it,
are
right?
terrible, right? It's not the pretty part. It's not the part that everyone's looking at. So,
Right, exactly.
and it's hard for me to believe that because everyone likes to look at everybody else's butts.
So you think the back would be right there.
Right. If you had 10 million, you'd like to be a baker. So going back to that childhood dream of being a chef and a baker, right?
Yeah, I'd have my own healthy version of a pastry shop.
Oh, forget that. I want the unhealthy version of your pastry shop.
Well, I mean, we'd have both. It'll be fine. It is Indiana.
Yep. So we listen to Murder Podcast. We like hockey, but we also like Boys in the Boat.
Yeah.
And then we have fantasy with Harry Potter and Marvel, and you ended the whole thing with a religious author, C.S. Lewis. Her favorite quote: "We meet no ordinary people in our lives."
Yeah.
Well, you're clearly not an ordinary person, and we've been, very fortunate to have you on today. It's been a lot of fun. Where can we find you guys?
You can find me at the Field House in Fort Wayne.
Okay. So Parkview, right?
Yes,
and online?
Right across from the Sky Zone. So if you go break something, come over and see us.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we'll be posting all your links to social media and your website on the podcast so people can find Parkview and they can look for you. For our listeners, be on the lookout for the Athlete Builder Summit coming up here in several months. We'll get more into that later down the road. Lucas doesn't even know about that yet, but I just dropped it on him.
Uh-oh.
And anyone that has questions they have for us or our guests, send them to info@athlete-builder.com. Once again, we have Sammy Main on from Parkview. Been a lot of fun today. Thanks so much, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you for having me. It's been amazing.
You did great, man.